You want to learn something? Let's do that. How about who did Sandy Hook? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's back ourselves into the answer to that. Would it make sense for the U.S. Department of Energy to have a team working strategically to protect the Sandy Hook hoax if they had nothing to do with it? No, of course not. But let's say hypothetically, the Department of Energy had a public want ads section on their website. Let's say they discovered someone started using that service to post messages asking for information about Sandy Hook that was coming close to unraveling it. If another agency of government stumbled across this and contacted the Department of Energy requesting they take it down, would they do it? Yes, of course they would. Would you then assume that because they took it down, they were the perpetrators of the Sandy Hook hoax? That would be quite a stretch. No doubt it's a sign of either supporting the conspirators or being subservient to them, though. Now, if you're someone who produces content for YouTube in particular, you're probably familiar with some users who are famous for being argumentative, mean-spirited, espousing statist views, obtrusive, ever-present. Some people refer to them as shills. That's because these users have something to sell. They're like pharmaceutical sales reps. The problem they have is that, just like Pfizer's Chantix that was dangerous and didn't work for shit, everybody knows who's trying to sell the idea that there's no hoax behind Sandy Hook: the perpetrators. The whole point of a shill is to appear to be just like everyone else, like you or me. But don't go thinking that just because they don't advertise their affiliation with other shills, they're not organized and working as a group. They are. So, if these shills are organized and working in a group, and their clear pattern of behavior is to denounce conspiracy theories about Sandy Hook, or otherwise direct blame away from the true perpetrators, then their employer or agency is either the guilty party itself or being contracted by them. Fair enough? That's a reasonable conclusion, I think. Sometimes I find myself imagining these shills as a disparate group of work-at-home types, connected only by their having applied for the same job on Monster.com. Other times I get the sense they're nothing but ordinary civilians that just happen to have been caught committing some crime and told they could avoid conviction if they'd allowed the government to track their internet activity and spread propaganda. But are most shills employed as contractors who otherwise have regular jobs and no direct connection to events like Sandy Hook, for example? Or are they mostly agents for government agencies who work full-time in government facilities and have a clear understanding of the complete agenda being carried out? What clues do we have that might help us to answer these questions? Would it be possible to know for sure that Sandy Hook was a hoax by finding these clues and seeing how they relate to Sandy Hook? On March 24th, 2013, one of these shills on Godlike Productions made a critical error. Of this fact, I suggest you do not have a logic confuse. The details of this error and further analysis were expertly presented by the authors at insanemedia.net. Go there and read the article entitled "Forum Shill Gets Busted, ATS and GLP Censor to Cover His Tracks." Let's get crazy and allow ourselves to jump to some conclusions about what happened. First, the shill made this error in the forum thread at GLP entitled "Medical Type Says Sandy Hook is Total Bullshit." So, from this we can assume the shill's intent was to influence other users' thinking about Sandy Hook. That seems like a fair assumption. Before we continue, it seems like the appropriate time to simply reveal what the shill posted in error, which will allow us to make some further assumptions. Without going to the level of technical detail that you can find by visiting the article at insanemedia.net, we can just cut to the chase. What that post contained was the result of a problem in how Windows handles what's been copied to the clipboard when Windows is being operated remotely. What this means is that we were allowed to see the content of the remote user's clipboard. The user had likely copied some text, like a bullshit argument relating to standard EMS procedures, and intended to paste that into their post. Instead, because of the Windows problem, it pasted what was previously copied to the clipboard and was never meant for us to see. The contents of the post also includes some extremely valuable insights. For instance, we see 4 user IDs and their respective locations. So we can assume from this that the shill was posing as a user for both Kazakhstan and Korea using 4 separate accounts. Under the checklist section, it refers to respondents, which is a very deliberate term that very likely refers to anyone responding to something posted by the shill. In the same sentence, we see a reference to your mission. So from this we can assume the shill himself, or at least his employer, views his activities as being related to a mission of some sort. We also see a reference to X-Start methods. X-Start is an application designed to launch applications on a remote computer. So from this we can assume the shill sometimes attempts to access material on the PCs of people they encounter on forums like GLP, and does so remotely. We see a question about whether anyone has deduced or accused you of hiding behind a proxy. Because the question assumes the shill is or does hide behind a proxy, we can assume that hiding behind a proxy is a common practice. If we assume that action code in this context is similar to action codes that appear in very sophisticated standards-based systems used in military and medical applications, this hints at the possibility that either the shill or those that interact with the shill are being assessed and their behavior or status is being cataloged for ongoing reference. Now that we've looked at some of the evidence that help us understand what the shill and likely others are up to, let's look at the most key factor, the factor that will tell us who the shill is working for. They were active on the topic of Sandy Hook, and only 3 months after the event there took place. And because the shill was observed attempting to discredit the notion that Sandy Hook was a conspiracy of any kind on behalf of their employer, can we not then assume their employer was involved in the conspiracy?